If you master this one trait, he'll obsess forever. 1. The trait that makes her hauntingly magnetic.
Have you ever wondered why some women vanish from a man's life, and yet, years later, he still feels them? Not their touch, not their voice, but their essence. A feeling that lingers like smoke in a locked room. A quiet gravity that seems to pull at him from somewhere he cannot explain. She may have walked away in silence, without begging, without a storm. And still, she lives in his psyche like a dream he keeps trying to return to. The truth is this. The women who create lasting obsession in a man's soul are not the ones who try the hardest to be remembered. They are not the ones who contort themselves for affection or play games to be chased. No, the women who haunt a man are the ones who mastered a single, sacred trait, emotional sovereignty. This trait is not a trick. It is not a performance. It cannot be faked or borrowed. It is not about being cold or emotionally unavailable or pretending not to care. It is the exact opposite. The emotionally sovereign woman cares deeply, but she does not collapse. She feels, but she does not react. She loves, but she does not lose herself. And that is precisely why a man cannot forget her. Her energy carries a purity, a deep knowing of her own value. It's not loud. It's not performative. It is unshakable. When he pulls away to test her, she doesn't flinch. When he withdraws affection to measure her desperation, she doesn't beg. When he disappears into silence, thinking she'll chase him, she simply becomes quieter, not out of cruelty, not out of manipulation, but because she has learned something rare, that her dignity is more important than momentary connection. This unreactive power destabilizes the male ego, because most men are conditioned, often unconsciously, to expect their emotional absence to create anxiety. They withdraw to see if she'll panic. They become cold to see if she'll warm them. But when faced with a woman who stays grounded, who doesn't reach, who doesn't chase, who simply observes and then makes her own decision, it exposes everything. Suddenly, the power dynamic he was trying to control fractures. Her stillness acts as a mirror, and he is forced to see himself. Not the curated version, not the mask, but the truth, his own instability, his own insecurity, his lack of control not over her, but over himself, and that is why she becomes unforgettable. You see, obsession is not born in loudness. It's born in contrast, in the space between what he expected and what he received. He expected neediness and got peace. He expected protest and got silence. He expected to be the sun around which she orbited, and instead, he found himself adrift, realizing she had her own light. That's the secret. She doesn't orbit. She radiates. She has not made him the center of her existence. She has a life, a purpose, a stillness that existed long before him and will continue long after. And for a man who is used to women adapting to him, this is terrifying. And yet, irresistible. Carl Jung believed that the unconscious mind is drawn towards symbols of wholeness, that we are magnetized by what we have not yet integrated. 2. A man who has not yet met his inner feminine, a woman with emotional sovereignty, becomes mythic. She becomes the anima, the elusive, magnetic soul image he projects onto her. But unlike fantasy, she does not need him to survive. And in that space between fantasy and reality, obsession is born, because she reflects what he lacks: inner calm, boundaries, depth. And yet, she makes no demand for him to change. She does not plead for him to stay. She lets him go, without ceremony, and in doing so, becomes a question he cannot answer, a wound he cannot heal, a mystery that cannot be solved by another woman's body. This is not about withholding affection. It is about being in control of your own emotional economy. She does not pour herself into empty cups. She no longer believes that love means sacrifice. She has learned, often through pain, that when she betrays herself to be loved, she is left with neither love nor herself. So she stopped. And when she stopped, she began to glow, not with arrogance, not with superiority, but with presence, with stillness, with the unbothered confidence of a woman who knows that being chosen is not a prize. Choosing herself is. And that is the one trait that drives men mad, because they cannot replace her. Not truly. They can try. They can scroll through faces, chase thrills, even fall in love again. But nothing feels like her. Because she did not just offer love, she offered awakening. She forced him, through her self-possession, to see all the places he still needed to grow, and growth, real, honest, painful growth, is the only thing the soul never forgets.
2. The unbearable mystery of a woman who leaves without begging.
There is a unique silence that surrounds a woman who knows her worth. It doesn't scream. It doesn't beg. It doesn't even whisper his name when the door finally closes. And perhaps that is what makes it so unforgettable. She doesn't storm out. She doesn't demand apologies or chase down the conversation that never came. She doesn't write long paragraphs trying to make him see her. She simply disappears, not out of malice, but because her energy no longer belongs where it isn't nourished. And that absence, that sudden void, becomes louder than any words she could have ever spoken. You see, when a woman leaves a man without begging, she leaves him with himself, with the weight of his own decisions, with the echo of her absence and the full presence of his unprocessed ego. She doesn't leave to punish. She leaves because staying would be a betrayal of everything she has become. This is not the feminine rage we're so used to seeing dramatized. It is not the chaos of heartbreak or the emotional flood of a desperate goodbye. This is deeper, more devastating. It is the energy of the sacred feminine in detachment, calm, unshaken, inwardly aligned. She doesn't chase. She doesn't collapse into grief. She doesn't turn her pain into a weapon. She just lets go. And that confuses him, because most men are conditioned to believe that if a woman really cared, she'd fight. That love should be loud, passionate, possessive. That if he walks away, she'll follow, eventually. But the emotionally sovereign woman doesn't operate within that framework. For her, love is not a war to be won. It is not a prize to be earned through pain. It is an offering, and if it is not received with reverence, it is withdrawn. She does not plead to be seen, because she knows that being invisible in the presence of someone else is the most dangerous kind of loneliness. And here's the tragedy for him. He won't understand what he lost at first. He might even feel relief. He'll tell himself she was too much, that he needed space, that it just wasn't the right time. He'll numb the discomfort with distraction, other women, other voices, the steady scroll of attention that costs nothing. But still, she lingers, not in memory, in energy in the way other women don't challenge him the same. In the way their affection feels weightless compared to the depth of her silence. In the way he starts to realize that being wanted and being understood are not the same. He'll try to recreate her, not consciously, but compulsively. He'll look for fragments of her in the softness of a stranger's voice, in the way someone else holds his gaze, in the smell of another woman's skin. But none of it is her, because what haunts him isn't just her presence. It's how she left, with dignity, with detachment, without need. Carl Jung warned us, the unconscious will always seek integration, and we project most intensely onto what we cannot yet embody. She was his projection, his anima, his feminine counterpart. And when she stepped away, she didn't just disappear from his life. She fractured his self-image, because her presence demanded that he rise. And now, in her absence, that demand remains. He cannot unknow her, cannot unsee the man he could have become if he had met her where she stood. And that is the unbearable part, that she was not asking for more than what he had. She was asking for him to be more than what he was pretending to be. But when she saw that he wasn't ready, not willing, not capable, not yet, she didn't scream or fight or crumble. She just chose herself. This is what makes her unforgettable. Not the way she loved, but the way she left. Out a woman who walks away from a man with calm forces him into confrontation, not with her, but with his own emptiness. She becomes the thing he can't name, the mystery he can't solve, the story he tells himself late at night when he wonders where it all shifted, and it did shift. The moment he thought she'd stay regardless of how he showed up. The moment he mistook her silence for passivity. The moment he forgot that a woman who respects herself will never wait forever for a man to decide if she's worthy. She is not ice. She is fire contained, not angry, awake, not bitter, boundaried, not dramatic, divine. She does not announce her departure. Because women like her don't leave to be chased. They leave to heal. And that is the final wound he cannot outrun, that her walking away was not a game. It was a graduation. She learned the lesson. He still hasn't. And until he does, he will carry her silence like a stone in his chest. a weight that does not leave, a memory that does not fade. Because she was not just someone he loved. She was the moment he was asked to evolve, and didn't. That kind of woman doesn't return. And that kind of silence? It becomes scripture.
3. Her silence is a test his ego will fail.
There is a silence so pure, so unshakable, that it does not beg to be broken. It demands to be understood. And when a woman who once loved him falls into that silence, it is not the absence of care, it is the presence of a boundary. A sacred line drawn not to punish him, but to protect herself. Most men are not prepared for this silence. They mistake it for indifference, for coldness, for manipulation. They think it's a tactic, a game. They assume she's waiting for him to notice, that eventually she'll reach out again, soften, return to her role as emotional caretaker. But she doesn't, because this silence isn't a pause. It's a completion. The sovereign woman doesn't go quiet to provoke a reaction. She goes quiet because she has realized that continuing to speak would be a form of self-betrayal. That explaining her worth one more time would be like screaming into a canyon. The echo always returns, but never the understanding. And so she chooses the highest form of self-respect. Disengagement. It is here, in the quiet aftermath of her retreat, that the man begins to unravel. Not because she left, but because she didn't beg him to stop her. Her silence becomes a test he cannot pass. Not because he is evil or heartless, but because the part of him that wanted control has no idea what to do when faced with detachment. The truth is, he was never taught to love without power, that he was taught that dominance equals value, that silence equals punishment, that whoever cares less wins. But the woman he's just lost does not play by those rules. She didn't leave to win. She left because staying would have cost her something sacred, her peace, her alignment, her truth. And so now, in her absence, he's left with the very thing he tried to avoid all along, himself. Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." And here it is, fate, wearing the face of a woman he cannot forget. A woman whose silence is louder than any of her words. A woman whose refusal to engage with his chaos has now become the mirror of his own emotional immaturity. This is not about playing hard to get. This is about being done. When a woman of depth and awareness goes silent, it is because she has entered the part of herself that no longer needs to explain what her energy has already made clear. And that energy? It is piercing. It says, "I saw you. I gave you a chance. I softened. I stayed long enough for you to step forward. And you didn't. So now, I am stepping away." And still, most men will wait. They will stall. They will assume her silence is temporary, that her emotional backbone is flexible, that her return is inevitable, until weeks pass, then months. And one day, they realize she's gone. Not just from his life, from the psychic space she used to occupy within him. Her silence has become its own language, and it no longer speaks to him. And that is the wound. He realizes that her attention was never owed, that her love was a gift, and that gifts, once refused, are not rewrapped. He will begin to replay every conversation, reanalyze every moment where she looked at him like he mattered. He'll search her social media, hoping for signs of regret, of softness, of invitation. But all he'll find is distance. Not emotional warfare, just clarity. She is no longer interested in reaching towards someone who leaned away. This is what he doesn't understand, that her silence is not an act of revenge. It is the echo of consequences, the natural unfolding of what happens when presence is taken for granted, and it begins to haunt him, because now he sees her everywhere, in the way a song lingers longer than it should, in the scent of someone who doesn't hold her fire, in the laughter that doesn't quite carry the same weight. Every woman becomes a reminder of the one who chose not to stay, not because he was unlovable, but because he was unavailable. Her silence speaks that truth now. And it speaks it with a gentleness that cuts deeper than any accusation ever could. He starts to understand that she wasn't trying to control him. She was trying to connect, that she wasn't punishing him with silence. She was choosing not to scream, that she wasn't playing games. She was preserving her spirit, and this realization, it changes him. Slowly, painfully, he begins to look inward, not because he wants her back, but because he wants to be the kind of man who doesn't lose women like her. He begins to listen to the silence, not as an enemy, but as a teacher. And in that space, a new question is born. What was I so afraid to face that I let her slip away? He may never get the answer, but she has already found hers. And in that knowing, she is free, because her silence was not a weapon. It was a declaration, and the man who fails that test, he was never ready for her love, only for her attention.
4. She is no longer a mirror, she is a flame.
Once, she reflected him. The woman he met was soft with her gaze, open with her time, generous with her emotion. She mirrored his potential, not his patterns. She saw what he could be, not just what he presented. That was her beauty, her curse, her danger. She did not love what was. She loved what could be. But those days are gone. She no longer stands before him as a mirror. She no longer carries his projections like sacred duties. She no longer makes excuses for half-hearted love. Because now, she has become something far more powerful, far more dangerous, far more divine. She has become a flame. And the thing about fire is, it no longer bends to the wind. It doesn't follow. It doesn't imitate. It burns. And in doing so, it transforms everything around it. She is no longer here to reflect a man back to himself. She is here to ignite. Carl Jung taught that true transformation begins when the ego breaks, when our false identities collapse, and we are left only with the truth. And that's what she represents now, the truth. The unflinching, wild, deeply feminine truth that burns through illusion, exposes shadow, and demands integrity. And this is why he can no longer look at her the same. She is no longer the dream he projected onto. She is no longer the safe harbor for his unresolved wounds. She is no longer the fantasy of unconditional softness without consequence. She is fire, warm to the worthy, consuming to the careless. She is the woman who has done her shadow work, who has met her own darkness and danced with it, who no longer needs to be rescued, because she has rescued herself. The woman who once mirrored his unclaimed potential now holds the torch of her own actualized worth, and he feels it, not just when he sees her, but in the absence of her reflection. Because when she was the mirror, he could look at her and feel temporarily whole. He could see his better self in her eyes. But now that the mirror is gone, he is left only with himself, unreflected, unromanticized, uncomfortable. That it isn't her he misses. It's who he was with her, the fantasy of the man he could have been, the one she saw beneath his emotional distance, the one she believed in before he did. And now, that version of him is unreachable because the woman who gave him that vision has let go. That he cannot handle her flame because it does not worship him. It does not soothe him. It demands. It purifies. It calls him upward. She has become the sacred fire of transformation, and that requires sacrifice. To stand next to her now, a man must first shed his ego, his games, his fear of intimacy, his addiction to power. She will not hold space for a half-healed man who wants her warmth but cannot match her depth. Not anymore. She has stopped making herself small for fragile men, stopped explaining her feelings to emotionally avoidant partners, stopped bleeding to prove she can love harder. This is not hardness. This is holy heat. She has become the woman who does not need to be chosen to feel powerful. She knows that the love she carries is rare, that her presence is an initiation, not a consolation prize, and that to be with her is to walk through fire, not to be burned, but to be cleansed. And yet, men still approach her with old patterns, old scripts, old masks. They want the mirror. They crave the reflection. But the mirror is gone, and in its place stands a flame that says, I am not here to fix you. I am not here to validate your confusion. I am not here to prove I'm worthy of staying. I am here to burn away everything you are not, so that what remains is truth. And truth is terrifying to the unready man. Her power feels like danger. Her standards feel like judgment. Her stillness feels like rejection. But these are not her problems. These are the projections of a man who still wants to be mothered, not met. She doesn't meet men halfway anymore. She meets herself completely. And from that place, she radiates. Her light is not desperate. It is discerning. Her energy does not search. It attracts. And what it does not attract, she lets go, without resistance, without regret. She does not chase, because the flame does not run toward the moth. The flame waits. And the one who is ready, truly ready, will not try to control her. He will become worthy of standing beside her. That is her new magnetism. It is not in her beauty. It is not in her seduction. It is not in her effort. It is in her still, radiant non-reactivity. Her willingness to walk away, not to hurt, but to honor her own alignment. She is the woman who no longer fears being too much. She is the woman who no longer fears being alone. She is the woman who no longer lives to be loved. She is the flame. And those who come close must be ready to rise in heat, or be consumed by their own inadequacy.
5. He doesn't miss her. He misses who he could have been with her.
He tells himself he misses her. The scent of her hair, the curve of her voice, the way she used to listen without interruption. He replays the small things, the way she laughed when she was trying not to cry, the way she'd pause before speaking. Truth, the weight of her hand in his when she trusted him, even for a moment. And yet, what gnaws at him isn't nostalgia. It's absence, not of her body, but of who he was in her presence. Because what she gave him, what she offered without condition, was a glimpse of the man he could have become. And now that version of him has vanished with her. This is the grief no one talks about. The grief of potential. You see, she wasn't just a woman to him. She was a mirror to his highest self. Not the polished mask he showed to the world. Not the charismatic performance he used to distract others from his deeper fears. But the real man. The one still buried beneath years of emotional armor and boyish pride. She saw him before he saw himself. And that's why she was dangerous. Not in her power, but in her clarity. She knew. She knew what he was capable of. Not just in success or ambition or attraction, but in depth, in devotion, in presence. And he failed to rise that he thought he had more time. He thought her faith in him was eternal. He believed, arrogantly, that she'd always be there, waiting, softening, adapting. But what he didn't realize is that women like her don't wait forever. They evolve. And when they do, they don't look back. Now he walks through his days haunted, not by memories, but by versions. Who he could have been if he had shown up differently. If he had chosen truth over ego. Vulnerability over control. If he had met her not with games, but with grounding. But the moment is gone. And what remains is the aching knowledge that she did not leave because he was unworthy of love. She left because he was unworthy of growth. Carl Jung wrote that the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. And yet, that is what she asked of him. Not perfection, not power, not promises. Just presence. Just honesty. But his unconscious ego, shaped by years of unchecked wounds, mistook her challenge as criticism, her standards as demands, her silence as attack, and so he resisted. And, in that resistance, he lost the very thing that made him more, because she wasn't just a woman who loved him. She was the bridge, the rare, radiant soul who held up a torch in the dark and said, "There's more to you, but I can't walk that path for you." And when he refused to walk it himself, she extinguished the flame, not with rage, but with finality, and now he sees her from afar, luminous, alive, untouchable. She is no longer available for his energy, no longer responsive to his breadcrumbs, no longer orbiting around his potential. She has returned to herself. And this is what burns the most, that she is not waiting for him to change. She is no longer invested in whether he does. And so, he doesn't just miss her, he misses the man he felt like when she believed in him. He misses the parts of himself he only dared to access because she reflected them. The strength he pretended not to need. The softness he tucked away out of fear. The hunger for truth he smothered with charm. In her absence, all of that returns, but without context. Without her, the man he could have been becomes a ghost. He may try to chase her again, but he'll find that she is no longer in the place he left her. Because she's not just farther along in her journey. She's in a different world entirely. A world where men don't need to be chased to be present. Where truth is the currency. Where self-awareness is more attractive than status. A world he cannot enter without first dismantling the illusions he clung to. This is the true heartbreak. Not that he lost her, but that she was right. Right about his capacity. Right about his avoidance. Right about the fact that he was not yet ready to meet a woman like her. And now he must sit with the wreckage of that truth, not as punishment, but as invitation. Because even in her absence, she is still guiding him, still burning in his psyche, like a quiet reminder that he can become more, but not for her, for himself, that he can grow into the man he once glimpsed in her eyes, that she was not his ending. She was his threshold. The door she opened now stands behind him, closed, but within him. The path remains. He will never forget her, not because of what she gave him, but because of what she awakened. A hunger, a grief, a possibility, and perhaps, one day, he will thank her, not with words, but with a life finally lived in alignment with the man she always knew he could be.
6. She leaves a legacy, not a scar.
Most people imagine heartbreak as a wound, a bleeding place, a scar we carry from someone who broke us. But not her. She didn't wound him. She unveiled him. She didn't leave claw marks behind. She left a mirror, and what he sees in it now is not her shadow. It is his own, because a woman like her does not pass through a man's life and leave him the same. She leaves no trace of vengeance, no shattered glass, no scorched earth. What she leaves is far more disruptive, a legacy. She was not merely a lover. She was a force of becoming, the kind of woman who steps into your life and quietly rearranges the furniture of your soul, not with chaos, but with clarity, not to control, but to awaken. And for a man who was unready, that clarity felt unbearable, because once she illuminated what was missing, he could never again pretend not to know. Her love wasn't addictive, it was activating, and activation, when met with resistance, is terrifying. She did not teach him with lectures. She taught with presence. She didn't argue, she revealed. Through her softness, he saw the harshness of his own emotional walls. Through her silence, he confronted the noise of his own fear. Through her depth, he realized how shallow his connections had been. And when she left, she didn't take that with her. She left it inside him. Carl Jung called it the anima, the feminine image within a man's unconscious, the sole figure that draws him toward integration. She was that anima, not because she tried to be, but because she embodied herself, so fully that he had no choice but to see everything he was not. That is the mark she leaves. Transformation. While other women may have passed through his life like passing storms, brief, emotional, forgettable, she was the axis, the moment of no return, the point after which nothing else felt real unless it mirrored the depth she brought. That he will try to replace her, not out of cruelty, but out of compulsion, because once a man tastes soul energy, nothing else satisfies. He will meet women who are kind, beautiful, generous, but something will always feel missing, a certain heat, a certain mystery, a certain knowing, because she didn't offer surface. She offered soul, and what he realizes, over time, is that her love never asked for perfection, only presence. Her energy wasn't intense because she was demanding, it was intense because it was true. And truth, in a world built on ego and performance, is a language few men are fluent in. But now, he hears it in everything. In music that feels too honest, in conversations that lack depth, in the silence between moments, where her absence hums like an unfinished song. He begins to notice how numb he had been, not just to her, but to himself. That is her gift. She didn't leave him with rage or regret. She left him with awareness, the kind that lingers, the kind that evolves. And while it hurts, while it stings in the quiet hours of night when distractions fall away, it is not a poison. It is a remedy. Slow, humbling, irreversible. She was not the storm. She was the stillness after it. And in that stillness, he saw clearly, for the first time. The truth is, most men do not meet a woman like her twice, because she is not born from scarcity, or trend, or need. She is born from alchemy, from years of self-confrontation, from choosing healing over validation, from turning wounds into wisdom, and wisdom into radiance. She walks in a kind of power that cannot be imitated, because it is not learned. It is earned. He didn't see that while she stood before him. Perhaps because he didn't yet know how to recognize real power, the quiet kind. The kind that doesn't dominate but disarms. The kind that says, I love you, but I won't abandon myself to keep you. And now, that voice echoes in the way he measures his words with other women, in the way he thinks twice before withholding affection, in the way he recognizes the parts of himself that need growth, not as flaws, but as portals. Her absence has become a teacher, and her legacy unfolds, Because now, he's becoming the man he once pretended to be. Not because she demands it, but because she inspired it, not with threat, but with truth, not with pressure, but with presence. And he will carry that lesson, not like a scar, but like a seed planted in the ruins of his resistance, watered by the tears he never showed, growing slowly into something worthy of the woman he once lost. She will not know the exact shape of his evolution. She will not track his growth, nor require his arrival, because she has moved on, not from him, but toward herself, and that, too, is part of her legacy. She doesn't linger to witness her impact. She doesn't demand a performance of change. She trusts the flame she lit to do its work. Without her, this is the kind of woman who leaves a mark not on the skin, but on the soul. She does not leave you ruined. She leaves you reborn.
7. The woman who chooses herself changes everything.
In a world that taught her to wait, to earn love through patience, to be chosen through pleasing, to tether her worth to the gaze of a man, she finally chose herself. And in doing so, she broke a spell cast across generations. This choice did not come easily. It arrived through the wreckage, through nights spent questioning, contorting, collapsing into roles that never fit, through silent betrayals, not of him, but of her own voice. Every time she silenced her intuition, every time she dimmed her light to keep the peace, every time she stayed when her soul whispered, "Leave," it cost her something sacred. And then one day, she heard it clearly. Enough. Not screamed, not shouted, but known. The kind of knowing that doesn't ask for proof. The kind of knowing that cannot be denied, even if no one else understands. She did not leave to be heroic. She left because staying would have been a death by devotion. The quiet erosion of her boundaries. The slow starvation of her self-worth. She had loved with her whole heart, and for that, she would not apologize. But now, that heart belonged back in her own chest. Because the woman who chooses herself does not become colder. She becomes clearer. She is not against love. She is for truth. And truth is this: if love costs her her dignity, her peace, her essence, it is not love. It is longing, a hunger mistaken for connection. And she no longer feeds on breadcrumbs, but she's learned to feed herself. Carl Jung believed that the process of individuation, the becoming of the self, requires the withdrawal of projections. And that's what she's done. She stopped projecting her need for rescue onto men who never even learned how to rescue themselves. She stopped assigning godlike power to partners who couldn't even hold eye contact during moments of vulnerability. She stopped hoping they'd change just because she could see their potential. She doesn't fall for potential anymore. She aligns with presence, and presence, she's found, begins within. Now, when she walks into a room, she doesn't seek attention. She commands energy. Not with words, not with performance, with her stillness, with the deep, quiet authority of someone who knows that nothing external can validate the internal work she's done. She has integrated her shadow, faced her wounds without bypass, sat in her own abandonment without needing someone else to fix it. And from that place, she no longer chooses based on need. She chooses based on resonance. If your energy doesn't match her peace, she will not stay, not out of cruelty, but out of alignment. This is why she is no longer magnetic to chaos, why she doesn't attract emotionally unavailable men disguised as soulmates, why she no longer entertains situationships. Maybes, almosts, because when you choose yourself fully, half-love doesn't taste the same. She no longer fears solitude. She has made it a sanctuary. The silence that once scared her has become her sacred rhythm. She doesn't confuse loneliness with lack. She knows that being alone and being abandoned are not the same. One is choice. The other is trauma, and she's done making decisions from trauma. Now, when love approaches, she does not immediately open the door. She listens. She observes. She asks, does this love honor me, or just want to use me as a mirror? If it is the latter, she walks away, not because she's hardened, but because she's healed. The healed woman chooses herself not out of rebellion, but out of reverence. For her journey, for her body, for the inner child who once gave love just to be safe. She protects that child now. This is the woman a man never forgets, not because she plays games, but because she refuses to. Not because she's hard to get, but because she's hard to lose. Once you've tasted her truth, deception becomes unpalatable. And yet, she does not make a show of her absence. She disappears like fog at dawn, quietly, completely, without explanation, because she owes no one an exit speech. Her leaving is not performance. It is prayer. A return to self. She does not wait for closure. She becomes her own. She does not chase peace. She embodies it. She does not demand love. She invites it. And if it does not come in devotion, it does not enter. And so the world changes, one woman at a time, when she chooses herself. Not from bitterness, not from anger, but from remembrance. Of who she was before the pleasing, before the pretending, before the proving. She becomes the woman who is not afraid to stand alone, because she has realized she is never alone. Her soul walks beside her. Her worth is her anchor. Her peace is her companion. And any love that joins her now must enhance, not eclipse, because the woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.